I want to welcome everyone to the second topic in our superintendent speaker series. So tonight, the topic is what to do when your child is struggling in school. And we have an esteemed panel this evening to really talk about all the supports and services that our district offers at the elementary, middle, high school levels and at AIM, our alternative program. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being here, and I'll introduce our panelists. For our elementary school, we have our distinguished principal of Maple East Elementary. We have Dr. Bill Bowen here. Thanks for being here, Dr. Bowen. For our middle school representation, we have Tim Penkoski, who is a school counselor at Casey Middle School, and we have Karen Steely, who is a school counselor at Mill Middle School. Thank you both for being here. At the high school level, we have Lisa Azzarelli Brown, and Lisa is our Learning Lab teacher at Williamsville East High School. And we have Terry Jacobs, who is our school counselor at Williamsville South High School, well, one of our school counselors, I should say, at Williamsville South High School. And then we have Mr. Phil Miller, and Phil is our director and our overseer of our AIM program. So thank you very much for all of that you do, Phil, there, and that everyone does. So we'll get started. And we'll jump right in. So I'm going to ask Dr. Bowen. Dr. Bowen, if you could please share with us what supports are available for our students. So when we say what to do when your child is struggling in school, from a principal perspective at the elementary level, what should parents do and what supports and services are available at the elementary level?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown Hall, and good evening, everyone. Nice to see all of you. I hope there's some familiar Maple East faces out there. And for those that don't know me, I'm the principal at Maple East. Prior to Maple East, I worked at Transit Middle School for 10 years, and prior to that, I was a high school teacher. So I worked with students and families going through some struggles at all three levels. And when I thought about this, I thought about a lot of different recommendations and things that we do here in the Williamsville schools. But I think the most important advice for a family and for parents is don't panic. Struggle is perfectly normal. It's a normal part of the educational process. All students go through struggle at one or more points in their educational career. And if you think of yourself as a learner, when you reflect back on your own school career, you probably remember points of struggle and perseverance and how you got through that struggle. So thankfully here in the Williamsville schools, we have so many supports for you as a parent, families, and students to help them as they move up the educational ladder here in the Williamsville schools. So from the elementary perspective, the first thing that we always recommend if your child is struggling is talk to your child's teacher first. Really as a partnership, we believe in working collaboratively with parents in that strong homeschool partnership between the child's classroom teacher and parents. And when you talk with your child's teacher, it really should be a problem solving session. Share with the teacher what you're seeing at home. Your child's teacher will be sharing with you some things that they're seeing at school. And it's very important not just to discuss observational data, but look at the more quantitative data like report card data, benchmarking assessments, New York State assessment data. Very important to look at how your child's performing in comparison to their grade level peers. But also, even if they're performing a bit below their grade level peers, are they making good progress? And your child's teacher will help you navigate that data and understand how they're doing comparatively with the peers in the school and also the progress that they're making. Once you've had a chance to discuss with the teacher and look at the data, the next step would be collaboratively identifying what is the exact problem. What's the nature of the problem? Is it reading? Is it math? Is it behavior? Is it speech? Is it social emotional? Maybe it's some of the above. Maybe it's all of the above. Very important to, at that point, even narrow it down even further. And what we recommend is narrowing it down to 2 or 3 attainable goals that your child can work towards at school and also at home. In jointly deciding with the teacher what's going to be done at home and what's going to be done at school. At the elementary level, oftentimes the teacher can put in place lower level interventions right in the classroom. This could take the form of targeted small group instruction, lower level behavioral plans, classroom SEL lessons. And it's very, very important to let those classroom-based interventions play out for 6 to 8 weeks and monitor the progress and see how your child is doing. So sometimes at the elementary level, we see parents, when they notice their child is struggling, they will immediately want some support from our reading specialist or our math specialist or additional testing. But our team truly believes it's very important to let those early stage, lower level classroom based interventions play out first and see how the child responds before we move up the ladder to what we call those tier 2 and tier 3 supports. So very important to discuss with your child's teacher while those lower level interventions are playing out, what you can do as a parent to support your child at home, as the teacher will be working on a number of things in the classroom. Some of the things that we recommend at the elementary level that parents work on at home with their child, especially those early primary years, reading at home is very critical. Reading with your child and also helping your child select books at their instructional level. And that's a topic to bring up with your child's teacher. Knowing what their instructional level is, that will help you decide and help inform what books you're choosing for your child. And actually, the teacher can make some very good recommendations for books that your child could be reading at home. We recommend that books of interest to your child, very, very helpful. Primary level, outer space, dinosaurs, animals, but also books with unfamiliar themes work as well. And we do recommend an element of pre-teaching or scaffolding if your child is reading books that are a bit unfamiliar for them. If you notice your child is getting stuck on words at home, we have a very strong phonics and phonemic awareness component at the elementary level. We recommend students drawing on those lessons and sounding out those unfamiliar words that they do not know, because that's reinforcing what's happening in the classroom. And we can't underestimate the importance of oral language and oral comprehension at home. So reading is critical, but the oral language piece is critical as well. So having conversations at home that are rich and engaging are opportunities for kids to build their oral language skills and their vocabulary. The more words they know, the stronger they will become with their reading. Now, when it comes to behavior, oftentimes parents will call us if they're noticing some behavioral challenges. Teachers will inform the parent if there's some behavioral challenges going on in the classroom. Same thing, we recommend starting very small and identifying 2 or 3 goals that your child can work towards, stated very clearly and in kid-friendly language. And thinking about, are there any incentives that the child can work towards? And the incentives could be visit to Potlers on Friday. It could be going to Five Below and having your child pick out something that's reasonable if they're making good progress. But incentives don't have to be tangibles. We do recommend lots of positive reinforcement for any child that struggles, is a really important part of any behavioral plan or any other support plan. In fact, kids who struggle tend to receive more corrections than praise throughout the day. So as a faculty, we're very cognizant of that. And when we put in place any behavioral plan, support plan for any child that's struggling, we really try to outnumber the corrections with the positives. We call it the 3-to-1 ratio. So for every correction that we give a child, we try to give them 3 positives, positive reinforcement, positive encouragement, or praise. That goes a long way at home as well, because we don't want the child to internalize those corrections if they're receiving too many corrections throughout the day. We use a problem-solving approach with kids also. Rather than talking to them, talking with them, helping them understand the problem and what they can do to work towards addressing the problem, changing the behavior, or working towards any other goal. So I mentioned it's very important to let these interventions play out 6 to 8 weeks. We found that putting in place strong lower level classroom-based interventions along with an effective homeschool partnership, most of our students make measurable progress. However, after those 6 to 8 weeks, if you notice your child is still struggling or even regressing, I would talk to your child's teacher again. We have additional supports available. We may want to discuss at that point some small group work or one-on-one group where they're building reading or math specialists, maybe some more formalized behavioral plans that we work on with the school psychologist, could be additional support from the school social worker or even speech teacher. And we might want to look at additional testing. But the first step at the elementary level, as I mentioned, is always starting with your child's teacher. We truly believe it's a partnership. We value your feedback. And we know and we're confident that working together with you, we will get your child back on the right track and ensure that they have all the necessary supports that they need here in the Williamsville schools.
Awesome. Dr. Bowen, thank you very much for that. And, I can't stress it enough, like you said, and I'm sure our other panelists will stress also, that partnership is so very important. And really communicating and connecting with your child's teacher is so very important. So thank you very much for that. You really highlighted a lot and a lot of great things that are going on, not just at Maple East, but across the district at the elementary level. So thank you very much for that. We're going to shift real quickly to our middle school. So we have our counselor from Casey Middle School, Mr. Tim, and we have our counselor from Mill Middle School, Miss Karen. So I'll ask you both. Now, we know that transitioning from elementary to middle school can be challenging for some students. Our first speaker series dealt with, what to do with our middle school students. And there were so many great tips. But what if we've explored some things and our child is still struggling in school at the middle school, right? If you can let us know what we can do, what supports are in place, or what services we offer at our middle schools in Williamsville.
I'll start. I'm Karen Stelly from Mill, and middle is the operative word. You are sandwiched between elementary and high school. It is truly a time of transition. It is a time where students enter our school and they are almost like babies. Every year we say, oh my gosh, they're so small. But by the time they get to 8th grade, they are truly ready to move on to the high school level. And the growth and the development amongst the middle school years is really incredible. But it's not to be underestimated as well. It's really important to understand that it's a time of growth and change for the student, but it's also a time of growth and change within the academic setting. Students are changing classrooms for the first time. They're going from teacher to teacher for their academic subjects. They are receiving numeric grades for the first time. There's a greater emphasis on independent work. And so that aspect of their life is changing as well. So yes, we need some supports in place to help our students really manage that. And I'm going to start with where Dr. Bowen started. We want to partner with you as parents and as families. Your child's teachers are your first partnership at the middle school. Certainly there's the introduction of the school counselor as well to help facilitate those partnerships. But really, your classroom teacher is on the front lines. All of the teachers, they see your child day in and day out, and to start there if your child is struggling is really key. They know your child well, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, those things that are happening in the classroom that do create the struggle, so that we have a baseline starting point to say, okay, now what happens?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm Tim Pinkowski. I'm a school counselor over at Casey, and communicating with the teachers right off the bat is really key. With the introduction of the school counselor, it does help as far as coordinating communication. Perhaps the issue that is being seen in multiple classrooms. But we are getting these students, when they're in 5th grade, when they're 10 years old, and it's their introduction to having now possibly 7 or 8 new teachers. And that's all different kinds of personalities. At the same time in their life, social dynamics are changing. Possibly the introduction of technology and the things that come with that too. So there's a lot of external and internal pressures that are occurring with our kids. So we can help them navigate that, and we can also help coordinate communication among the teachers. If it seems to be an isolated issue, it is best practice. Contact the teachers. I always suggest a phone call, because so much can be lost through email, tone, and things can be misinterpreted. Even an email to say, hey, can we set up a phone call? And having that person to person, voice to voice is so helpful in clarifying things. And with that next step being, I'm going to loop in the school counselor. The teachers often do anyway, just saying, hey, I just had a good conversation with so-and-so's parent. Here's what we talked about. Are you seeing anything? And then what we can do is put that student on our agenda, because that's just as best practice. We have weekly team meetings where, as counselors, we can meet with our teachers and we can bring students up if there's concerns that are raised, and it helps us isolate issues.
And there's a huge spectrum of support we can offer children who are struggling. You know, those tier one, those entry level basic supports we can offer, which can be as simple as extra help with the teacher. That can come in the form during home base, sometimes before or after school, during a lunch. You know, of course, we don't want to stop students from having their lunch, but, you know, we can be flexible and creative in ways that children can get some extra attention from the teacher just to reinforce those things they might be struggling with. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra time to get over that hump, and then it builds confidence in the student. They can understand kind of the teacher's style and what they're looking for. And the teacher also really sees the child in a different way when they're working in a smaller group or one-on-one to say, okay, I see where the gaps are. I know what to pinpoint here. This isn't a global problem. This is what we look at.
Right. And I also see it like sometimes it takes a neutral voice, like the school counselor, to be able to say, oh, I see you get along really well, or you're working for this teacher, and we're starting to struggle over here. And just acknowledging those differences in personalities and just validating the fact that perhaps there's a personality conflict and talking that out a little bit, but still getting to the solution. What can we do about that? And it can be informal check-ins with the counselor. There doesn't have to be anything formalized as far as weekly meetings or anything. It could just be temporary where we're checking in, and just so that they know that attention is being paid to the issue.
The other kind of supports that we have certainly can be and will be more formal if necessary. We have structured academic intervention services, which target those students who, if they're taking the state tests, perhaps they've underscored or scored below where we'd like them to be. So we look at those scores and we say, okay, what students are in need of some extra foundational information, support, teaching that can help them in their everyday classroom work. So academic intervention services, absolutely something we rely on quite a bit to help our struggling learners in both math and ELA. I think another avenue that we've recently put into place in our middle schools all across the board are our learning labs. That is a place that is monitored, not even monitored, that's not quite the right word. It is instructed by a certified teacher. Students use the learning lab during their free time during the day, a team study, a clinic, a home base. Times of the day where students are free. It's not a study hall. It's a time for the student to have the advantage of working with a certified teacher on whatever their aspect of struggle is. For some students, it's organization and kind of those executive functioning skills of just managing different classrooms, different expectations, different teachers, multiple assignments. For some students, it truly is content-based, and they need the pre-teaching or the reteaching that a teacher can offer that will help them in the classroom because they simply need a bit more repetition. So Learning Lab is another wonderful tool we use for our struggling learners to help them in the classroom on a day-to-day basis.
I can't say enough about Learning Lab. It's been an incredible program that our district has put into place, and it's helped so many of our students at Casey too. I'd say another opportunity is Homework Club. Most of the middle schools, if not all the middle schools, run a homework club. And that's just an opportunity to go after school and just making it part of your routine, whether it's 1 day a week or 4 days a week, just to go after school and get your homework done, with a teacher being in the room to ask questions about, it may not be the exact content teacher, but it is a teacher who's often familiar with the content. They've been around quite a while, so it is a helpful situation. And I think another thing is peer tutoring through the high school. We're able to, if homework club's not an option for whatever reason, they just do better with a one-on-one. Our high schools do offer peer tutoring services, and we can link one of our students up with a volunteer from the high school and set that up on a regular basis.
Sometimes students struggle just even a little more than that, and we have to take a look at that. We, of course, want to give time for all of those other things that we've mentioned this evening to take hold and to see if they really are the solutions that we need to help a struggling learner. But sometimes we do have to take it to the next level. And that's where you really want to partner with your student school counselor to be able to say, okay, what next? We have something at the middle school level called a child study team, where we really work with a lot of our professionals, the other school counselors, our school psychologists, our speech pathologists, special ed folks, just to partner together and say, this is the profile of the student who we've really been struggling and really trying to put some supports into place, and yet they still need something more. Let's put our heads together and be creative about that. Parent course, we want parents part of that process, whether it's through child study team or through even parent-teacher conferences with our students. We also do that as well. But sometimes if it goes through the child study team, sometimes we do say, okay, maybe we need to implement something more, some kind of behavior plan, some kind of study plan, maybe additional testing. Maybe it requires a recommendation, if we're worried about something like attention, a recommendation to take their child to the pediatrician. We can go in a lot of different directions, but I think the message that we'd like to send is that there are options, and to list all of them, really, we wouldn't get to the bottom of them, because every student is truly individual, and we want to make sure that we're addressing the student's specific needs. So depending on what those needs are and how they're presenting within school, we can say, okay, let's try this or that, and we use the professionals who are many and talented and willing to say, how do we get this child to where he or she needs to be?
That's awesome. There's so many supports, and you've highlighted so many supports at the middle schools also. And we see that the supports, they can grow and get greater depending on the level that the student need is. So I appreciate you outlining that. And I appreciate you mentioning the learning labs, because that's something that was started with the ARP and ESSER funding that we received from the government. And, it was so important for our district that even when those funds ran out, to make sure we put that into the general fund so that those learning labs can continue, because we know what a great resource they are for our students and the positive impact they have in our schools. So speaking of Learning Lab, I'm going to transition to the high school supports now. And one of our high school panelists is actually the Learning Lab teacher at Williamsville East High School, and that's Lisa Azzarelli Brown. And accompanying Lisa at the high school level is our school counselor, one of our school counselors from Williamsville South High School, and that's Terry Jacobs. And we know that at high school, these supports and services look a little bit different, and we know that they actually manifest themselves differently. But what we have to remember is that even though these students, they think of themselves as adults, we have to still remember that they need services and supports also, no matter how tall they are. Because when I tour the buildings, I'm like, these are some tall students. No matter how tall they are still children, right? That's why we don't allow them to vote till they're 18. So they're children and they make children decisions. And so with that, we want to hear what supports are available for our students at the high school level.
Well, my name is Terry Jacobs, and like I said, I've been at Williamsville South for over 20 years. So I've been working with teenagers for quite a long time now. And in terms, I talked to several counselors in our office, even a couple of our other schools. So just so parents are aware, at the high school level, each of the high schools does have at least 4 counselors, even more than that. At Williamsville North, we have social workers, school psychologists, And we also have added last year to our staff, we have a worker that comes into our school from Spectrum Agency also, which is a referral service that we utilize often with parents of students that have some significant need. And so with that said, in terms of our support services, one of the big things that I was thinking of when this presentation came around was, you know, if my student was struggling in school, the first thing I would really be asking is to identify what the need is, where that struggle is coming from, what the biggest challenge is that that student is facing. And there are so many areas as our students are transitioning from the middle to the high school, there's transitional issues that often take place in terms of transitioning that setting. There's some anxieties that go along with that. But then as they move through high school, there's a whole host of different things that emerge. So one of the things that I heard from every single person that has talked so far is communication. And I feel like that is our most important avenue with families, is really having mutual communication with each other, so that we're able to understand what the issues are that that student is facing. When I'm meeting with a student or talking to a parent, I usually try to look at the whole picture, and we try to come up with, is a struggle with a student something that is specific to one particular class? You know, students, as they're emerging through high school, there's a lot of developmental issues that take place. They're struggling to improve their independent skills, their identities, their voice, their self-advocacy. All those things are coming into emergence at the high school level. So very often we will see, you know, students experiencing maybe mental health challenges, or those mental health challenges become exacerbated as their growth and their development takes place. Or if a child has experienced a life trauma, sometimes those really have an impact on the classroom. So what we try to figure out and drill down with parents is the source of the struggle. Okay, is it a single subject? Is it globally in each one of the classes? Is the student struggling in tests or quizzes? Homework completion in a variety of different ways. So once we connect with a parent, the first thing I would say to a parent is contact your school counselor when you're experiencing a challenge, or contact the teacher directly. And teachers can do tier 1 interventions. I know tier 1 is something that has been mentioned by a couple of our panels, and sometimes simple things like, you know, moving closer to the source of instruction is something that is a key thing for a student. Sometimes needing a little bit of extra time on a test or quiz, or maybe a student struggles with being able to start on a larger English project, you know, and putting their writing down into, you know, a big project is a source of stress and anxiety, and they can't do it, or presenting in front of a large group of people. So, I mean, those are simple things that when you work with a teacher, you can come up with, you know, a progress plan to work through one particular area. If we see those things happening in multiple areas, you know, we also have that parents come in and do a conference together. We have had, I do, and we all do conferences where we just work with a parent and a student, or we have the teachers all come together and have a conference together to review what's happening with the student. In terms of the interventions, I know Karen and Tim had mentioned several of the interventions that take place at the middle school, and we're going to bump those interventions right up to the high school level. Academic intervention services were mentioned that take place at the middle school. Those interventions are happening at the high school as well. With the New York State Regents assessments, we do have AIS, we call it, at the high school, academic intervention, that is tied to the New York State regulations. So if a student is struggling to get through a New York State assessment, we often will look to putting a student in academic intervention services to support getting through a New York State assessment. We do have Learning Lab. I'm going to let Lisa talk way more about that to you guys. We also have literacy support. Literacy support is tied to some of those state assessments that take place at the middle school. So when they bump up to the high school, if a student needs additional support in, say, reading fluency, they may get placed in literacy support to give them additional support. We also have direct teacher assistant where students will come in either in the morning or stay after school for homework helpers. Okay, so those things are happening at all 3 of our high schools. We all do this very similar things. Teachers will lend when they are available for students, and they'll seek them out before, after school. I usually tell students at the high school level, self-advocacy is really important. So this is a skill as you're moving and they're growing and developing. We want to see students advocate for themselves. And we also want to see students communicate with their teachers, with their school counselors, and learn how to talk about, where their needs are. So we find that that's a really important skill that they're going to have to carry into the college setting. And that all begins as they're moving and growing through the high school setting. Also, I know Karen had mentioned support teams at school. So if you're doing a whole lot of things to support your child and they're still really struggling with school, we do have a system in place where if a student needs to have perhaps something like academic testing, we have availability that can happen even at the high school level. We do have a team approach where counselors will get together with school psychologists, social worker. We can talk about a student's need and see if there is a need for additional, like maybe educational testing to determine if there's a need for what we call an IEP or support services through a resource room or an academic support. And we also have services called a 504 plan. And sometimes if a student is struggling with mental health needs that impact the classroom setting, that could be something that could be put in place to support a student's need as well. So we have a variety of those services that can really help a student at the high school level. So in addition to that, what we also want to see happen is, we had mentioned the self-advocacy part. So are we going to talk a little bit about how we can, when we're communicating with parents, that we often find at the high school level, there are certain things that traditionally come that we see as a problem that are happening at the home setting that we're continually talking about. And one of the things I will mention today is sleep. I find that our kids at the high school level, I guess we mentioned the introduction of things like social media and technologies and the phone and stuff like that. And high school students oftentimes will spend a significant time on their phone and using social media, and sleep often becomes a huge factor in the education process. So very often I do hear myself asking a student even, or a parent, how much sleep they're getting at night. Because 8 to 10 hours is a really important thing for a high school student, and to be able to walk away from their phone and shut their brain down so that they can, recharge the battery. And it does affect their academics significantly in the classroom. So that was one of the things I was really thinking about today. Also, what we see is kids struggling with things like organization and time management and balance and prioritizing of assignments and things like that. So those are key things that we would help a student process through at the high school level. Lisa, I'm going to carry it on to you a little bit. I know you wanted to talk more specifically about what you do at the Learning Lab.
Sure. And Terry, thank you for being brave enough to mention phones, because it's one of the things that's been on my mind as well, because I see students during the day in Learning Lab become distressed by a text message that comes in, or a message that popped up. And I think the reality is that it is a reality for our students, and they have a difficult time putting aside. We talk a lot in Learning Lab about how it takes, I read recently, 3 times the brain power to multitask, and we're really not wired to multitask, and you waste your brain energy every time you pick up your phone and look and then try to switch back to an academic task. So I think that that is something even as a mom that I work on. But jumping ahead, so I'm Lisa Azraeli Brown. I'm the teacher, the Learning Lab teacher at Williamsville East High School. I student taught at Williamsville East in 1995. I was a member of the English department in 1997, took some time off to raise my kids, was back part-time at Heim, North, South, and East. I live in the district. I have 3 children, ages 20, 16, and 12. I'm in it as a mom. I'm in it as a teacher. I can tell you just this week, I experienced some struggles with one of my children that kind of came to a crescendo, shall we say, and found myself living the advice that we're all giving, reaching out to teachers, starting with email, asking for conversations, speaking to guidance counselor, looping in a principal, really just and leaving those conversations feeling heard, and leaving those conversations feeling like my student, my own child, was in really good hands. So I wanted to offer that as well, that the system can really work if we work together. And like I said, I'm there with you. So I am lucky, very lucky to be the teacher on Learning Lab at Williamsville East. And as Dr. Brown Hall mentioned, Learning Lab is relatively new to our district. This is our 3rd year. I'm really proud to be a part of that program, and I'm really happy for my own children and the children of the district that it exists. I think of Learning Lab as the S, E, and L together. And I had a student who graduated last year who was with me from the beginning. And he drew a Venn diagram and talked about how Learning Lab is the sweet spot for SEL, for students who might need a little bit more attention. And as others have mentioned before, it's a place where a content area teacher is providing maybe some study skills, looking at patterns, executive function skills, community circles, coaching. I do a lot of coaching with kids about how to communicate to peers, how to communicate with adults, how to really work through some of the struggles that might lead to academic struggles, because oftentimes those 3 things are linked together. And when we find there to be a struggle in one area, we're really seeing it kind of affect the other areas too. So as everybody's mentioned, pinpointing and then really strategizing and coaching through students through greater self-advocacy. I also really, I guess enjoy is the word, being an advocate for students and helping them work with teachers, helping be like almost like a middleman, a communicator with what I'm seeing, the effects classrooms can have on students. And I'm actually really proud of the work that Learning Lab is able to do in that way, and bridge that sometimes gap between students. My own children don't want to come home sometimes and admit that things aren't going really well, and parenting is really hard. Being a teenager is really, really hard. And so being there to support students in that way is something I really enjoy. I wanted to mention, outside of the curriculum, we have social emotional support for students, such as wellness committee activities you'll see in the various high schools where they'll have wellness days. At East during exam week, we've had big kind of party games in the commons and music playing. And just to give an example of like a de-stressing kind of day, something that our wellness programs have run. We have sources of strength programs at the high school level, which really help tap into students being able to identify who and what their sources of strength are, people, activities, and being very mindful of the positive things in life to help us get through the hurdles and the challenges. At the middle school level, we have WebLink. At the high school, we call it Link Crew, or vice versa. I'm sorry, I think I'm mixing those up. We have speakers come in and work with students. We had a great speaker at East just a few days ago or last week, talking to students about perseverance and resilience. So even outside of curriculum and Learning Lab, which is a specific program, there are a lot going on in our high schools and middle schools and elementary schools to support students across the social emotional learning spectrum. I wanted to share too that as part of Learning Lab, we have a homework club as well, where I'm available to work with students after school and coach them along and get them started. Ms. Jacobs mentioned sometimes it's just the daunting blankness of a page. And today I was able to, get a young man started with a big project that he has by just reminding him that it's okay to not know the whole direction where you're going, and being just beside him. And we have peer tutors in the building who help each other. Sometimes we have a Learning Lab student who's really good at Algebra 2, but isn't so great at Global 2. And so we swap expertise and watch students feel successful, and all the things that all of my colleagues have mentioned before about positive reinforcement and building self-esteem. Really, as Dr. Brown Hall mentioned, are still important when the bodies are 6'3", because some of them are. And just with that, I want to quickly, before we turn it over to Mr. Miller, share that when this topic was presented, I turned to the experts in my room who are the students, and I said, you know, I'm going to be representing this, but I'm not the only Learning Lab teacher. And I only know what I know. So help me tell parents what you would like them to know. And out of the mouths of babes, they said a lot of what we're saying. We'd like more praise. We know that we make mistakes, but if you can acknowledge the small things and the steps in the right direction, and I know that as a parent, I'm guilty of this, you know, letting the regular things go. Yes, you took out the dog, or, you know, you let the dog out this morning. I forget to say thank you, but when a homework's missing, I'm quick to you know, mention that. So that was a really good reminder for me. This was mentioned before. It's finding something the student likes, whether it's a sport that they play, and using that as an incentive. Dr. Bowen had talked about incentives. Some of my students said it might be an activity. Like one student said, I like to go for coffee to Panera with my mom, and she sits and reads the paper and I do my homework. And that's an incentive and a side-by-side. So sometimes we call that body doubling, where sometimes just being next to a student, even if you're not engaged in the work, but they can ask a quick question. They don't have to feel paralyzed. Any of that kind of incentive, or time with parents. They want our time. And like I said, it is hard, but they're asking for that. We know that learning management systems have benefits, and sometimes students can hyper fixate on, like, what's my grade, right? So I would add to the communication with teachers, focusing, yes, grades are important, but what's the learning piece, right? What are they communicating about the learning, and how can we have that conversation about, like, the skills or the habits that will help make that improvement? And as Dr. Bowen mentioned before, giving time for that to gestate and to come to fruition. But my students said, please don't check WITS every single day during the middle of the day, that they want to have conversations. They would like help setting plans, but it becomes very, very stressful when they feel like they're not doing things right, more noticing that there are some things that are going on. One of my students said, please don't forget that we're kids too. Another said, I would like kids to know that having more confidence in yourself gets further than you think. So anything we can do to boost that confidence. You're a really good babysitter. You did a great job with your little sister. You might not be so great at math right now, but you do have these strengths, and reminding them that there are strengths we can tap into, and then strategizing. Okay, what are those skills? What do you have to do to babysit your little sister? There are a lot of steps. You are good at multitasking. You are good at chunking things. Let's apply that strategy to something that you find overwhelming. And they said to help them know that it feels good to get your stuff done. That was literally the quote. It feels good to get your stuff done. So reminding them that setting the time aside, helping them find a dedicated workspace. If it takes going to Panera or somewhere a little special to make it happen, those are the things that my students are asking for.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
so
that's
thank
so
you
true.
very much.
That's so true, because my son talks about the sense of accomplishment he gets when he has completed his work. So thank you very much for that, Lisa. And Terry, something I want to piggyback on what you said. You talked about the additional supports that we have from Spectrum Services. And with our district being awarded some of the RECOVS grant funding, we're going to expand those services down to the middle school also. So we're very excited about that. So thank you for mentioning that. And so thank you for a little insight on what supports and services are available at the high school level. There's a lot, and I'm sure our parents are learning of a lot of new things they may have not heard about previously. So I thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over now. I want to let you all know, if you have questions you're going to be able to use the raise your hand function. You're going to be able to ask your questions live. And for those of you who have put your questions in the Q&A section, we will get to those momentarily. All right. But I'm going to turn it over now to Phil Miller. And Mr. Miller is actually the director of our AIM program in Williamsville. So Mr. Miller, if you could talk about what AIM is and what services and supports are offered at AIM. Thank you.
Yeah, AIM is a really unique opportunity for students. It's a AIM stands for Alternative Instructional Model. So it's an alternative program that's offered for all three of our high school students, or three students at all three high schools, at East, North, and South. It's a program and not a separate school. So the students are always members of their school. So if they're a South student, a North student, an East student, they still can participate in all of those school activities, but they take their academic coursework at the AIM program. So we are a small building that's right outside of the North Athletics door, right there, right between Casey and North, kind of in the parking lot. It's a small building. We have 4 teachers, 1 counselor, and a part-time social worker, along with 2 support staff in there. We service about 40 to 50 students comfortably over there. And these are students who want to graduate high school, but for some reason, something is preventing them from being successful at their home school. And each student is unique. So each student, you know, if there's 50 students, there's 50 different reasons why they're not being successful at their home school. And we try to work with them on those individual reasons and kind of work with them as individuals. Because we're so lucky, it is a small environment, so that we can do that. We can dedicate that individual time and effort to those students and their individual needs. Our main goal is building community. And if a student is struggling with school, they probably don't like school. I mean, especially by the time they're 15, 16, 17 years old, if they're not doing well in school, they probably don't enjoy it. We try to make that school time, that 6 hours, 7 hours that they're in school, as tolerable as possible, while getting them the curriculum and instruction that they need so they can graduate. They get a diploma. All of our students get a diploma if they graduate from their home school. So a student coming from North that goes through the AIM program gets a Williamsville North diploma. It's just a really great opportunity that we have. Like I said, class sizes are small. There's about 10, some classes are smaller. Some classes have 5 or 6 students. We would say on average, a class has about 10 students in there. So some might have a few more. But it's just, like I said, a really great opportunity, and allows us to be flexible with each student individually, because we don't have 900, we don't have 1,000, we don't have, 1,300 students in the building. We have 50 students, and we can really work with them all as individuals. And it's really geared towards upper level high school students. So we want a student to go to their main high school, see how it's working, trying to get things going. And if it's not working there, then they work with their school, their home school, to kind of figure out if AIM is a good placement. And then that's kind of when I jump in and work with the student and the counselors and administration to kind of see if AIM would be a good fit. We make that determination, and then hopefully we kind of get the student rolling over at AIM and get them out with a high school diploma.
Awesome. With a high school diploma. That's awesome. Yep. Mr. Miller, thank you for that. And some key words that you said were individualized and unique. And I think we've heard that this evening, that although we offer so many supports, whether it be at the elementary, middle, or high school level, all the supports are unique because every student is unique, right? So one size does not fit all. A student may be very responsive in Learning Lab. Another student may be very responsive with the academic intervention services that they receive. So every student is unique, and their supports and the services offered to that student are unique also. So if you have questions and you're participating on our live speaker series tonight, please use the raise your hand function. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask these 3 questions that are in the Q&A, and anyone on the panel can answer them. So the first question is, are the New York State standard tests the primary resource in evaluating the student compared to their peers?
I can respond to that one.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen.
No, that's only one. We use multiple measures in the district. That's only one. resource that we use. At the elementary level, we have benchmark assessments for both reading and math that are administered multiple times a year. And we have data and progress monitoring meetings with the teachers throughout the year to closely monitor the progress of the students. Classroom assessments are an important tool also. We generally use common assessments across the level that are designed by the teachers, and they're aligned with our curriculum and our programs. So the classroom assessments are important as well. And the teacher observations of the student progress is a very important factor that we consider also. So multiple measures of assessment, that's only one of the measures that we use. Lots of different measures that we use to measure student progress at the elementary level and also at the other levels in Williamsville.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Bowen. I completely agree. You said it very well. So I have another question. I have a middle school student in 5th grade that we believe is struggling with executive functioning and organizational skills. We have been in contact with his teachers and school counselor. What can we do at home with him to help with functioning and organization as well? And the part B to that, is there a homework club at Transit Middle? This is the first I heard of it. So the first part is really, what can we do at home to help with the executive functioning and organization skills?
Personally, I think identifying a way for your child to become organized. You know, traditionally we offer the planners, the agenda mates, but that doesn't work for everybody. So perhaps at 5th grade, perhaps it's just a better understanding of that skill. You know, more repetitions working with that skill, and then ultimately rewarding that skill. You know, treating it like any other behavior that Dr. Bowen talked about as far as rewards, and developing a system that way. But if it's the writing down, it's the planner is the point of pain, then identifying a different way, basically trying to eliminate friction. I think sometimes when we send home our supply list at the beginning of the year, you're going to see individual folders and individual notebooks for every subject. And yes, that's great for the majority of our students, but it's not appropriate for everybody. And so if your child needs a giant accordion style, keep everything type file, then that's going to be the right method. Or although we have pros and we have cons with all the technology we inundate our kids with, one pro would be they can open a Google slide and you could create this for them and just label it with every single day. So their Chromebook is in front of them anyway at the middle school level. Just having them type in a bullet of their homework and then showing you at home is the same as the agenda mate. The idea is for them to take care of themselves, to be able to communicate with themselves when it's time to take materials home, and also to be able to communicate with you, the parents, what they have for homework, so then you can see that it's complete.
Well, the only other thing I would add to that is routine, and structure. You know, I think at home, lives are so busy. You know, we don't even always eat dinner as families anymore. There's practices, there's games, there's rehearsals, there's lessons, there's lots of things happening. But that homework time is special and it needs to be treated as such. So the more you can build a routine that just allows the child to have some structure, to know and understand that this is the time for school, and kind of lay it out the same way each evening, wherever that is, whether that's right after school, before dinner, after dinner. You know, every family kind of has a different time where that works, but to structure it as such that students just really understand how to go about not only the timing and setting up the appropriate space with the appropriate materials, but also how to check that agenda that Tim was just talking about, how to go through homework, make sure, look at what needs to be done, attempt the assignment, complete the assignment, check it off. You know, those routines, you have to stick with it. You know, it's not 1 or 2 nights. And sometimes you have to sit right with your child to make that happen and kind of massage it. There's some trial and error, but ultimately that routine becomes a habit, and students can gain independence the more they practice.
Never heard of a quick fix when it comes to organization. It definitely takes a long time to turn the boat around, but you're right, the routine and the practice. And the second part of that question was a homework club at Transit Middle. I don't know. It's treated like every other club. It's chess club, art club. And if there isn't currently a homework club there, it may be just a lack of interest in previous years. It's been a part of our culture at Casey for a long time. But if you're interested in it, it's something that you could call into the school and talk to the assistant principal or principal and just ask, if there's any interest in that and how you would get one started.
Tim and Karen, thank you very much for those answers. Greatly appreciated. I'm going to jump on to the next question. Is Learning Lab the same as instructional support?
So I'll answer that one. So it's different from instructional support in that instructional support is tied to an individualized learning plan. So that's CSE process. Learning Lab, at least at East High School, the way students become recommended for Learning Lab is oftentimes a teacher will come and say, I've noticed a pattern where a student is maybe having some test struggles, or, the student needs a little coaching with some reading, or, follow through with math homework, etc. So sometimes it's a teacher referral, sometimes it's a guidance counselor, a parent might call a guidance counselor and, ask, and then depending on what the needs are, again, starting with the classroom teacher, seeing if that intervention works. If not, then students can be moved into Learning Lab. So it functions similar to a resource room in the sense that I'm doing all of the things with kids, right? It's like, so someone might need help with global, someone might need help with math, someone might just have a backpack overflowing with papers, and we need some kind of system. We need to figure out, is that an accordion folder, a notebook, whatever. So it functions in a similar way, but it's not mandated by an IEP or in an official document like a 504 in the way that an instructional support class would be. And I'm not in any of the classrooms with students. So when there's co-taught situations and then students have instructional support, the special ed teacher will be in those classrooms. I'm not in the classrooms. I'm with students most of the day, working on things.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lisa, for that. So we have another question. Although a Williamsville parent, I'm curious as a teacher how the district is addressing the incredibly high absenteeism rates of students. It's truly a fallout effect from COVID and contributes to educational struggles for kids. Anyone have any insight on that?
I can.
Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, at the middle level, and Tim, if Casey's doing something a little different, but I imagine similar. I know at the middle level, that has been a constant kind of communication and point of discussion, especially at our guidance meetings with our administrators to say, how do we work on this? And we review attendance on a regular basis, and we have a process in place where we meet with students, counselor to student. Sometimes we ask the parents to come. We certainly make parent phone calls to say, there is no substitute for direct instruction. And yes, students can make things up if they're absent, and things happen. There are reasons that students need to be absent, but I know the question is geared towards those students who have an exceptionally high absentee rate. So we will call parents. We will invite parents in. We send letters home to say, you've reached this number and this threshold, because we just really, again, we don't want adversarial. We want a partnership, and we want to say, how can we be supported? What is the obstacle in getting your child to school? And how can we help you as a parent to make sure that school is a priority and that coming to school is certainly first and foremost a priority for your family?
I would jump in to say that I mentioned some of the programs like wellness and in Learning Labs and teachers and relationships, right? So I heard recently a slogan that said relationship before responsibility. And I think that another thing that was on my bullet list of mentioning before is that our district really offers teachers excellent professional development. And so we've partnered with the UB Trauma Informed Care program, which has been really important in my growth as a teacher and colleagues, and in terms of social emotional learning. And Linda Rue has led excellent classes on community circles. And I've seen, again, I mentioned that I was at both at the middle school and the high school level, and watching how teachers have made a really concerted effort to build community. Not that we didn't always do that, but in different ways, maybe with a more concentrated effort. And, you know, usually when I think a teacher or is aware that a student is missing, like trying to bring that person in. I've had teachers ask me to help connect kids to clubs or an activity, or just really finding an incentive to get that child to school, connecting that with someone. We've had opportunities where, you know, if a kid's feeling really anxious, they will spend half the day kind of working, easing in, back in, working on some work in the guidance office. And then teachers will kind of stop down and visit and make that re-entry comfortable and more doable, less anxiety producing for students. So those are more informal, I guess, approaches, but we are aware, and we are talking about it at the high school too, and really trying to help kids feel connected to school.
For sure. Thank you very much. Because those are the issues that we deal with, and with all of the supports that our parents and our community see that we offer in our district, you know, it goes without saying that we want what's best for our students. We want to see our students excel, and we want them in our schools. And that's why we create intentionally inviting environments so that students have a phenomenal educational experience in Williamsville. And I'm sure everyone can see from the supports that we offer that we really don't just say that, we really mean it. So I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to thank our panelists, Mr. Phil Miller, Ms. Lisa Azzarelli Brown, Ms. Terry Jacobs, Dr. Bill Bowen, Ms. Karen Stelly, and Mr. Tim Penkoski. So thank you all very much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom about what we offer in Williamsville with our parents this evening. So everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you around the district. Be well now. Bye-bye.